In the last couple years, consumers have been hit with an annoying and frustrating inconvenience in the video game industry. A price increase for new AAA games releasing on current generation platforms. Specifically, an increase of $10 from 60 to 70, which is an increase of just a bit over 16%. For other countries, though, the increase hits harder than that, such as Canada, where the same games now cost $90 instead. Considering how much the budget of the average AAA game seems to be ballooning in size, this price increase feels like an unfortunately inevitable change. But at the same time, why don't companies simply spend less money on game development? What reason is there for a game to cost $200 million and take 5 years to make? The scope of AAA game development has inflated dramatically in the last 25 years, and it's showing no signs of slowing down. It's times like this where we should be thankful for the increasing prevalence of AA and indie games to give us more choices and provide us greater perspective. You can have a game like Hi-Fi Rush, a stealth-dropped hit and amazing new IP that briefly took the community by storm, and it came with a very modest $30 price tag. And that's assuming you didn't just play it on Game Pass. Or you can buy something like Vampire Survivors, a downright addicting little gem made by a one-man team that can drain dozens of hours out of your time for a price of only $4. The price tag that is stuck to a game is a very big driver of expectations and harsher criticism. It's much easier to vocally slam a $70 AAA game for being bland than it is to do the same to a $10 game made by 4 guys in a basement. Now more than ever, the dollar value of a video game is extremely important. People want to get their money's worth when they finalize that transaction, and the higher the cost, the more impactful or the more of a commitment they expect the game to be. But there's a bit of a complication here. Are people looking for value in the wrong place? Obviously, the discussion on whether a game is a good value or not is one that's been going for longer than the recent price increase. And the entire time that it's persisted, many people have a strong, stubborn focus on playtime hours above all else. A lot of players, especially those who lean more towards the casual side of the audience, feel like a high amount of content for content's sake is the end-all be-all for what makes a game a good value. I do understand why. Not everyone can just up and grab a new game every few weeks, and would prefer a game to last a long time, even if it has some periods where it drags. At the end of the day, they care more about simply being occupied at a reasonable entertainment level than being totally blown away. It's kind of why open world games, no matter how stale and basic some of them may be, continue to have a strong presence. It's easy to cram content into them that might or might not add any significant challenge or depth to the experience. It can be as shallow as it wants, whether it's fetch quests, repetitive missions, or a fuck ton of collectibles or icons to check off. Many people think it all justifies the price simply because it adds hours to the playtime clock. In fact, this mindset is so prevalent that some people use another game's average completion time to insult it if they deem it too short, regardless of how fun or well-designed the game actually is. I'm not here to tell you how to spend your money. It's yours and you can ultimately do whatever you wish with it. That is your business. But I have a very strong disagreement with the idea that any kind of content that inflates your time investment is worthwhile. Not every hour is a high-quality hour. To be blunt, I would rather play a game that was 8 high-quality hours long than 60 mediocre hours on average. Why do I feel this way? What would I consider to be a high-quality hour? Getting into the nitty-gritty is a little bit complicated, but to start things off on the simplest of explanations, I would say that the quality of an hour spent on a game depends on where you would place it on a scale that goes from pure entertainment to pure obligation. Where would you place the last hour of gameplay on this scale? Was it something so ridiculously fun that you would replay that hour over and over again if you could? If so, then it goes towards the entertainment end. Did you hate the hour and only tolerated it because you wanted to make progress? Well, then it would go towards the obligation end. The final goal of any game, regardless of its length, is to hopefully keep the quality of the average hour on the entertainment side, whether it's with engaging gameplay or gripping storytelling, whichever is relevant to the intended experience of the game. Ideally, the game stays almost at the very, very tip the entire way through. The problem is that the longer the game is, and particularly the wider its scope, the harder it is to stay in this area. I'm not suggesting that it's impossible for open world games to stay on the entertainment side or anything. Elden Ring was my game of the year last year, so I would definitely say it stayed on that half of the scale pretty consistently. But I am saying that over the last several years, I have developed a greater appreciation for more focused experiences. When I was younger, still in my early to mid-teens, I was extremely hopeful for the growth of open world games. After the release of classics like Grand Theft Auto San Andreas and 4, Shadow of the Colossus, Far Cry, Oblivion, Fallout 3, and more, I thought open world was eventually going to take over the industry. But I foolishly also assumed that open world design would evolve along with that growth. Little did I know it would actually level out, and most developers would fall into a complacent formula. I would get pretty tired of it pretty quickly, save for a few key exceptions. The open world format, as far as most of the industry is concerned, has hit a plateau, and many started to get self-satisfied and abide by the Ubisoft way of doing things. Very little interactivity with the world at large, and most content being story missions, repetitive side missions, gathering collectibles, and visiting unremarkable landmarks for the sake of it. It all quickly devolved into a bunch of checklists that preyed on a player's own sense of completionism. Open world games that I truly enjoy have become few and far between. Because of this, I've gained a reinvigorated appreciation for tight, focused games with little fat to trim. Reason being, the more zeroed in a gameplay experience is, the fewer weak spots or drags it'll likely have, or at least that's the expectation. For me, I think the placement of the quality of a gameplay hour can be decided by asking two key questions. The first and most basic question is, did I engage in a gameplay loop or section of storytelling that I would be eager to participate in or witness again? And then the second question, would I still replay this hour even if I was given the choice to skip it? They are somewhat similar questions, but not necessarily mutually exclusive. Ideally, a high-quality hour makes you say yes to both. And for me, the question that many hours in most open-world games fail is the second one. So many hours feel occupied by busy work and bloat, so I feel like I neither made worthwhile progress or accomplished something that I would want to do again if given the choice, even in spite of solid combat and traversal mechanics. But shorter, tighter games can provide such a focused experience, it feels like I'm doing something important every minute, let alone every hour. Some people might use the fact that it's short as a point against it, but here's the thing. If I feel like the game has a very high concentration of high-quality hours, then why wouldn't I consider replaying it? Replayability is an aspect of video games that is sadly lost on some players. Now granted, not every game aims for replayability, especially plot-focused games that purposely aim for more of an impactful first playthrough than anything. But for gameplay-focused titles, a lot of people think that the experience is completely over once the credits roll, no matter how much they enjoyed the game, and that they need to move on to something else. But that's not necessarily true. For example, take character action games like Devil May Cry or Metal Gear Rising. These games always get multiple playthroughs out of me, because they offer such deep, engaging, and fulfilling combat experiences that I cannot help but want to experience the game over and over again at varying difficulties to truly test how far I can go. I know some people criticized Devil May Cry 5 for its simplistic level design of hallway, then box to fight in, then hallway, then another box, etc. But that was simply a type of level design that played to the game's strength, the fighting. Styling on enemies was all I cared about, and the game did not waste my time letting me get to those fights quickly. It helped keep the pacing quick and the worthwhile content dense. I ended up playing DMC5 on every one of its 6 difficulties, before stopping halfway through Hell in Hell mode to start playing Sekiro, which had just come out at the time. And then you have survival horror games. Resident Evil 4 Remake came out recently, and I played through it 4 times before I even published the review. And one of the things I praised the remake for was keeping the experience tight and well-paced, even though it's one of the longer Resident Evil games. In fact, this is true for pretty much all the RE Engine Resident Evil games for the most part. I played through each of them multiple times before I finally put them down. I'm aware that not all short games have replayability on their side, but when they do, it can make all the difference. I've seen some people foolishly dismiss the notion of replayability, considering it a useless metric for quality, but I think it's one of the best qualities a game can have. Replayability can come in many shapes and sizes, from unlockables and rewards for repeat playthroughs to a ranking or point system that encourages you to optimize your runs, to regular online leaderboards that instill a sense of competition with other players, to cooperative play with friends, and to the good old-fashioned reason of replaying the game just because it's that much fun. Replays contribute to your total play time too, and if the game is consistently fun enough that you believe that there are no hours that you would put in the obligation side of the scale, then why not go through it again? Wouldn't it be an easier decision to replay a game like this instead of one that doesn't even come close to the same density of high-quality hours? Which is more appealing? A shorter game that's tight and well-paced with never a dull moment, or a much longer game that periodically has slow, boring parts that you have to push yourself through to get to the good stuff? For me, I find that those boring parts are the things that stop me from replaying those longer games. One of the silliest comments I've seen regarding this discussion was someone saying that replayability is stupid because you get what you wanted from the game through those replays instead of having that fulfillment added to the first playthrough. They were suggesting that a game should just be made longer instead of replayable. And that is one hell of a misunderstanding of how all of this works. Because the reason I'm replaying the game is because it's so fulfilling on a moment-to-moment basis, and unnecessary bloat would have crippled that fulfillment substantially, and ironically, killed my desire to replay it at all. Sometimes the games you put the most hours into are the games that can be beat in one sitting, because their tightness, pace, and focus enable an extremely high number of replays. A frustratingly pervasive idea, especially among more casual players that are used to having blockbusters pushed into their face with aggressive marketing, is that games that are clearly not AAA must be inferior time investments. It's what leads people to ignorantly make statements about the gaming industry as a whole being stagnant and lacking in variety of quality games. It's a topic I've discussed before in its own video. A link is in the description. It probably goes without saying, but the greatest trick that the biggest publishers have ever pulled is fooling the average gamer into believing that state-of-the-art graphics and inflated budgets are linked to high-quality gameplay experiences. But that simply is not the case. I know I am a broken record about this game, but it's only because I had such high expectations for it, and it's the Callisto Protocol. As a AAA game that cost me $70, it unquestionably has some of the most jaw-dropping visuals in the last couple years. The environments are incredibly detailed and dense with assets. The character models are alarmingly lifelike, and the facial capture is impeccable. The lighting is atmospheric and striking. Only a blind person would not think that the game is gorgeous. But then the gameplay is shallow, repetitive, and has a skill ceiling that's only about 6 inches above the floor. The map design is linear to the point where exploration is borderline non-existent. Enemy variety is pathetic, and New Game Plus had to be added in an update a month after launch, but by then, everyone who was let down by the game was already over it and looking forward to the Dead Space remake. The gameplay experience had some moments, sure, but overall, it was probably the most beautiful game I've played that had the lowest quality hours on average. And then, less than 2 months later, with no marketing campaign to speak of, the aforementioned Hi-Fi Rush releases as a surprise, both on Game Pass and as a $30 outright purchase. I had decided on the latter because I'm actually not a Game Pass subscriber, and not only was it a worthwhile investment, I ended up loving the game so much I would have gladly paid full price for it. In fact, I can confidently tell you right now that Hi-Fi Rush will end up being in my top 5 of 2023 list. That's how much I loved it. I easily put twice the amount of hours into it than I did into Callisto Protocol, and for less than half the price. Not only that, but Hi-Fi Rush famously outperformed Forspoken, another $70 game, in revenue, even though it was possible to play Hi-Fi Rush without even buying it. What I'm trying to say is, the AAA mark of big budgets and pretty graphics is starting to lose its own value, especially recently with the utterly broken launches of Jedi Survivor and Redfall. More and more people are realizing, and should realize, that the games that offer the highest concentration of high-quality hours do not always have that $200 million production cost, or a 6-year development cycle with a team of hundreds, or even vast open worlds. Sometimes the best values are the games that cost $4. There's a reason why Vampire Survivors was my second favorite game of 2022. Not only did it have that high hour-to-dollar ratio, it is pure, unadulterated fun the entire time I'm playing it. Every second is highly entertaining, let alone every hour. Again, I'm not trying to tell you how to spend your money. It's ultimately your own decision to make. But I am simply suggesting that focusing more on tightly paced games with a higher concentration of high-quality hours will probably make you a happier, more satisfied, and more open-minded gamer. And maybe your taste will become a bit more eclectic. I think that more or less concludes all my feelings on the topic of the dollar value of a video game and the quality of an hour. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you around.